Hello, everyone. Thank you, French German Chambers, for arranging this. Thank you, everyone, for coming out in this freezing weather. And welcome to everyone who's online as well, made the sensible choice. We have an interesting panel here today. Jacques, de Villiers, and I'll introduce them each a little before they speak a little later on. It's Nikita Butter and Jeremy Ontier. I am Lawrence Drop. I'm from Quiver Tree Capital. I founded it some time ago. Quiver Tree has been working in BE since the codes were amended in 2013. And we do BE in a different way. Our approach is to be anti-zero sum, which is to say we align interests, turning empowerment to a competitive advantage. That's the approach that we'd like to take. We worked with many companies, many of whom you might know. So, for instance, Items Engineering, Powders, Becker Mining, LC Packaging, Bolloré, Eodis, Eco, Verifone, so a number of companies that you may be familiar with. The format of today is going to be, I'm going to give a keynote address, then I'm going to introduce each of the three panelists, giving their insights in an area that they're particularly afraid with. And then we'll open discussion to the floor, ask any questions to any people you like. You can direct it or we'll answer as we like. I believe Nikita will be our team's whisperer getting questions online so that everyone who's online can contribute as well. Following that, I'll sum up, and after that, invite you to speak to any of us informally in this forum. Pretty much every developing market has localization regulations, and BEE is just South Africa's localization regulation. The question is, why is it so onerous? Why is it so much more than in other countries? And the reason that our localization is as complex and onerous as it is relates to South Africa's particular and awful history. Each of the different elements relates to an area of exclusion that once existed historically. The codes are well-intentioned, but terribly crafted, which means that there are unintended costs and unintended consequences. One might ask why a wealthy kid at a private school should be privileged in the economy because they happen to not be white at this stage. Or, for instance, foreign company coming here now, who by definition didn't contribute to the ills of the past, must pay for it now. There are twin imperatives, one way or another. The one is transformational, and well, everyone must support the aims of empowerment, surely. And there's still something that's broken in this country that needs to be. This is the tool that we use to do it, and I think that anyone involved in empowerment, the onus is on them to give it its flavor. The other is transactional, and unless you're empowered, you're not going to survive in the South African market, or at least you're not going to thrive. And
excuse me, I'm in a meeting.
It's a ticket to the game in South Africa. Done right, it can be a non-price form of competition. Next to the goods and services that you're selling to your clients, you're giving them something else. In the form of preferential procurement points, enabling the rest of their procurement programs. So by doing empowerment effectively from a transactional point of view, what you're doing is you're getting a non-price form of competition, pricing power, and also making clients sticky in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. You're adding value that is next to the value that companies generally add. Empowerment is a distortion of the free market. And what does that mean? It means that there are unjustified winners and losers. And what we've got to try and do is ensure that our clients or our companies benefit from empowerment, that we can turn it into a competitive advantage. It's an odd thing to think of, but onerous regulation is a good thing if it's more difficult for your competitors and more expensive for your competitors than it is for you. So a higher barrier to entry actually protects you. In what I'm going to talk about next, I'm going to give substance to what I've said about turning empowerment into a competitive advantage, and taking you through A, why almost everyone gets empowerment wrong, and B, how a subset of SMEs, how QSEs, can get it very right. Okay. Why do people get empowerment wrong? They get empowerment wrong because they think in terms of level. Almost everyone thinks of empowerment in terms of level. Level 4 is okay, level 1 is great. And what is the benefit? What does it really mean being level 4 or being level 1? It's spend recognition. In other words, if you're level 4, a rand spent by a client with you is recognized at 100%. A rand is recognized as a rand. If you're level 1, it's recognized as 1.35, so 105% spend recognition. What you're seeing is a small pickup, 35%. However, you'll know that the cost of moving from level 4 to level 1, depending on your industry, is either very expensive or just impossible. And it's the wrong place to be. Let's delve a little deeper into what spend recognition means. Spend recognition relates to preferential procurement. And preferential procurement is the currency of empowerment. It's the mechanism by which empowerment ripples through the economy. It's why clients care about their suppliers' empowerment, because they need preferential procurement points. And as I say, the difference between level 4 level 1 is it allows you to offer 35% more of the points that they need to score. Now, it's the completely wrong place to be. If you're trying to optimize delivery of preferential procurement points instead of level, the outcomes can be hugely different. And in a minute, we'll go to a slide where I hope you're going to remember one thing about the presentation. It's the slide that I'm going to show you next. Here you can see the small pickup. The circles represent, the areas of the circle represents the benefit to the client, level 4, level 1. An optimally empowered company will deliver far more points to your clients than it would if you were just looking at level. And it's a slide. You can see that is the same size. The scale here is correct. That's a level 1 company that complies 100% with the ownership as it appears in the ownership element of the scorecard. However, if instead you focus on ownership as it appears in the preferential procurement element of the scorecard, this is the kind of difference that you get. A level 8 company that's optimally empowered will deliver 2.3 times more points than a level 1 company that complies with ownership fully as it applies in the ownership element of the scorecard. This is powerful, 2.3 times for a level 8 versus a level 1. If you look at level 7, it jumps to 11.5 times, and times the points that you'd be delivering to your clients. And if you want to compare apples with apples, if you're looking at a level 1 company that looks at ownership as it applies to the ownership element versus one that where it applies preferential procurement element of the scorecard, you're looking at an almost 30 times pickup. So what you're looking at here is a 3,000% pickup rather than a 35% pickup, which is the difference in being able to. This is where value is. Next, you may, sorry, on your way, some people may not be au fait with how procurement works. And so I'm going to go through the next couple of slides quite quickly, just so that everyone is on the same page and can understand it correctly. If you want to go into more depth, this presentation will be circulated, and so you'll be able to see it or ask us now or later. Go to the next slide. So when I wanted to understand how preferential procurement is calculated, it's subject to something called total measured procurement spend. TMPS is operational costs, capital costs, cost of sales, excludes salaries, taxes, certain categories of imported goods. But practically speaking, it's local spend. So how much local spend are you spending with a supplier? So percentage of TMPS times the spend recognition that we just described. So for instance, level 4, 100%, level 1, 135%. If you're a majority black-owned company, then your client is entitled to multiply that by a factor of 1 to 2. Then you divide that by the target per each of the elements and multiply it by the points for the elements. So practically speaking, and being an empowering supplier, everybody is an empowering supplier. You can see that the target is 80%, for which you can achieve 5 points. These are probably the worst value points of the whole scorecard. You can see that if a client were to spend 1% with an empowering supplier, 1/80, multiplied by the 5 points available, you'd achieve 0.0625 of a point. That's really a rounding error. And you can imagine if you look at that, that was a level 4. If it were a level 1, it would be 35% more or nothing. So it would still be almost no value. However, you can be in as many of these categories as you like at the same time, or with the exception of a QSE, is up to 10 million rand turnover, QSE is 10 to 15, you can only be one of those. However, if you look at the scores that 1% will deliver for each of these different elements, you can see that QSEs and EMEs give you a significant pickup. Being majority black owned, very significant. 1% will deliver 2.22, which is like 4 times what a non-majority black owned company would deliver. Then being at least 30% black woman owned, targets only 12%, which you can achieve 4 points, so even better value points. And then a couple of bonus points, being majority designated. Designated groups are groups that the codes are particularly trying to benefit through empowerment, which is to say youth, unemployed, disabled, people living in underdeveloped rural areas, and black military veterans. So these points are so hard to achieve that most companies don't even try to get. On the other hand, though, if you can deliver these, they're golden. Because look at this, 1% spent with a majority designated group-owned company delivers a whole point on someone's BE scorecard. And compare that to the 0.0625 that companies that only comply with ownership as it applies to the ownership element of the scorecard will deliver. Next, I'll give you an actual comparison to similar companies. So what we're comparing here are 2 level 2 QSEs. So we can get a very clear comparison between the two. You can see that 1% of TMPS, you multiply level 2 by the spend recognition level of 125%, so it equals 1.25%. You can see a very small pickup on empowering supplier, but then you also achieve points for 1% for QSE. So 1% spent with a level 2 QSE will deliver 0.32 of a point. It's not trivial. But now imagine that it's a majority black-owned, women-owned, designated group-owned company, so an optimally empowered company. You'll be scoring in each of these, in everything except being an exempted micro-enterprise. What you're going to be delivering is 2.72 points to your clients for 1% of their TMPS, 1% of their TMPS. This is hugely effective for clients. This means optimally empowered, this QSE will be delivering 8.3 times more points than level 2 QSE. That's not optimally empowered. Here again, the volumes of these circles represent the points to be delivered to clients. You can see this represents what I just described, 8.3 times more. Imagine that there were generic entities without the benefit of the QSE. What you're looking at here is about a 31 times pickup. So this is what I mean when I say turning empowerment to competitive advantage, delivering huge value to your clients, such that they've got to think twice before they ever stop buying from you. That, well, some industries are more sensitive than others, but some of our clients face the mining industry where particularly valuable. And in the mining industry, they want to buy other things that are not even provided by our clients, from our clients, because of the procurement benefits they're getting. Okay. So, what? Being optimally empowered is where the real value lies. It's not about level at all, it's about the constitution for ownership. And what I'm going to look at next is addressing SMEs, although everyone defines SMEs slightly differently, looking at the subsectors of SMEs that are qualifying small enterprises, so turnover between 10 and 15 million. And how this might be applied. This is the SME scorecard. You might be familiar with it. It's got all of the ownership, management, control, skills development, enterprise and supply development, preparation, procurement, and socioeconomic development. There is also the YES initiative that people can use if they would like. So that this isn't completely abstract, I thought of a fictitious company with a turnover of 40 million rand. It's a service industry company, so its spend is relatively low, its salary bill is relatively high. And although I looked at a few, I looked at estimated for a manufacturing company as well. It's different, but not very different. Just to run through a couple of things here. Ownership target, like the generic scorecard, 25% black owned, 10% black women owned. Management control actually is the one that it's often not too difficult to do for large companies, but it's very difficult to do for QSEs and especially family owned companies, because 7 points of management control for the QSE scorecard depend on having black and black women executive directors. Now, executive directors, there are only 3 and maybe 4 roles that really count, CEO, CFO, COO, and some companies count chief technology officer as well. In a small company, it's very unlikely that you're going to have anyone that's not grown up in the company in one of those roles. So likely you're going to be losing at least 7 of those 15 points. And it's not to say that 60% of your managers are black at all the other levels. So you may even lose further points on that. Skills development, given that you can double count certain elements of it, 3% of your leviable amount. Leviable amount is basically just the cost to company of an employee. Enterprise and supply development, 1% for enterprise development, 1% for supply development, and then also 1% for socioeconomic development of impact. So 3% of your net profit after tax, the target is that you contribute to beneficiaries in this instance. Putting prices in my fictitious company, we get to, for a company with a turnover of about 40 million rand, about R1 million, give or take, that it would cost to comply with empowerment. It's a lot, but there's more than just the monetary cost of this. Large companies often have someone who takes care of empowerment for. For SMEs, usually that's not the case, which means it ends up taking management time, which is perhaps an even more costly resource than just the cash. Being a QSE that is not majority black owned is the worst spot to be in the whole school. You've got to comply with full scorecard, but you don't have the cash for the staff to do it properly. The flip side of that is the sweetest spot in the whole scorecard is a majority black owned QSE. If you're a majority black owned QSE, you're automatically level 2. You don't have to comply with the other 4 elements of the scorecard. You can put a line through. So it's much easier. And as I'll show you in a minute, it can be much cheaper as well. In what I have here, I'm comparing 4 different companies, 4 different QSEs, one that has 0 ownership, one that has 10% ownership, which is the sub-minimum, which is what is required if you want to be able to use the YES initiative, one that is 25% black-owned and does its ownership directly as it applies to the ownership element of the scorecard, and the last one that is 51% black-owned. You can see in terms of the cost of these things, level 7, level 4, level 2, first 3 companies, what my estimate of their costs would be versus the cost of being majority black-owned. Now, of course, there are many, many ways of being majority black-owned and how we understand it in this instance. So what I used here is what it would cost using one of the Quiver Tree structures. Could be more, could be less, but using our methodology, that is what it would cost you, which is to say, being majority black-owned in the first year is cheaper than even being a level 7 with no ownership, spending on the other elements. So being majority black-owned in its most expensive year is the cheapest alternative of doing it. A lot of the costs are upfront, which is to say that over years, it becomes cheaper and cheaper. So over 5 years, you can see that that's exaggerated. It becomes much, much cheaper to be majority black-owned as a QSE. then, as we've seen before, the points that you would be delivering to your clients as a majority black and optimally empowered QSE is just much, much higher. And if you're going to combine these two, what's the cost per point? It becomes a crazy sum here. The value that can be delivered to clients by your being, if you're a QSE, by being majority black owned versus the cost for you is incredible. I think that's compelling one way or another. Now, lots of people don't want to be majority owned by anyone who is not them. And I must be careful because this is not a Quiver Tree marketing exercise. However, let me say that there are ways that you can be legitimately majority black owned without it detracting, without diluting the control of the current shareholders at all, in ways that, like other traditionally funded structures, have very limited dividend dilution for a considerable time, in ways that are flexible such that you can reverse it, you can collapse the structure at any moment at a known cost, not at no cost, mind you, but at a formulaically derived cost, whenever you want to do so, and in a way that's better for the empowerment partners than existing structures are. So all of this is really doable. One anecdote, one of our clients, Rico, a Japanese-owned London holding company, owns all of the distribution companies around the world. It's just how they roll. In South Africa, it could mean that they could close down because Nashua, their biggest competitor, is empowered. Understanding what I've gone through, the Japanese shareholders understood that they were effectively still the 100% shareholders. They were on holiday. They wanted their shares back. They pay and they get their shares back, so they could restore themselves to 100% shareholding whenever they wanted to at a formulated derived price. So the last bit is to say, don't be afraid of being majority black owned. And if you're not afraid of it, look at what it can deliver to you and to you. Now, let's have questions once everyone has presented and spoken about what their area is. And I'd like to call on Clark de Villiers, who's an expert, not just an expert in skills development, but is also part of the German Chamber. So we'll have insights that I hope will be really interesting. Skills development is an interesting element as they go because it has, on one hand, the most expensive points in the whole scorecard, and on the other hand, the cheapest points in the whole scorecard. So there are, if anything captures the mismatches of empowerment, it's the element in which he's an expert. So, Jacques, over to you.
I considered a slide presentation.
Would you be able to stand?
Stand there, absolutely.
The audience online and.
So I considered a slide presentation as well. And I know that the rest of us, we have 20 minutes combined. There's no way that I can get through that slide presentation in 5 minutes. So in terms of the skills development element of the scorecard, please ignore everything that you've heard. Because Lauren just told you that you don't need the skills development element at all. So so assume for a moment that you are trying to comply with the other elements as well. Along with ownership and preferential procurement, which is really the two elements that Lawrence focused on, the other priority element in the scorecard is skills development. What a priority means is that if you do not achieve either skills development or preferential procurement, it's with its three components, or ownership, then you are docked one level on your B-BBEE scorecard. So if you're not going for the 51% ownership, but you're trying to meet all the criteria and you fail in one of these three areas, then you are docked automatically. The other way then to get yourself bumped up again is through a YES initiative. Let me just give you a very broad overview before I even get. So with the QSE scorecard, as you see, there is 100 points available, but then there are 8 bonus points. With a normal generic scorecard, that bonus point rises to 18, of which 5 would be available for skill development. Now, like I also said, you need to know where to start with skills development, because if you look at the different levels in which the skills development scorecard is broken up. Level 1 talks about training for Black people. Level 2 talks about training for Black students. Level 3 is the disability spend, and that talks about spending on disabled Black employees. Then the 4th level talks about the number of people that you have to put into learnerships, apprenticeships, and internships to maximize your points. And those have to be employees. But the good news in terms of the skills development scorecard, he did say also that you can sometimes play double, is that an employee can be both a person or a student or both. So if you're sitting with a Black employee that is also a student, and that is disabled, you can basically score 3 times for that employee. So where do we start? So we start with the employees, number of employees that you have to put on a learnership, apprenticeship, or internship. Now, the BEE definitions of learnership, internship, and apprenticeships are slightly different from what you think, but everything that you think about is also part of that. So where you have a situation where somebody, for instance, leaves FET college and they've completed an N6, it's only a part qualification, you can take that person on board, give them the practical 18-month experience, and that will qualify as spend on BEE. The beautiful thing also with learnerships, internships, and apprenticeships is that the moment you apply these, you can also claim the salary or the wages or the stipend of that individual as part of your BEE spend. And that is why you want to start this. So say, for instance, and also it is based on the EAPs. So with a small qualifying enterprise, it's not a matter of saying, this is 3% of my livable amount, this is what I'm going to spend. It's very specific. You have to spend a certain percentage on African males, African females, Indian females. It gets a little complicated. But the good news is I've developed a calculator for that. We will know who was at the meeting, and the calculator will be made available to you. So the only thing that you will then do is you will fill in the number of employees, and you will fill in the livable amount. And then you know what you are to spend on different demographics within the skills development program. And now I think, and that's really it. So there's also with sub minimum and it being a priority element, the first thing you would possibly try to do if you're just trying to be compliant is to get to 40%. Now, 40% of the available 20 points for skills development on the generic scorecard, not necessarily the QSE scorecard, would be 8 points. And normally, and the way I also have a fictitious company in my mind, Lawrence, and I always say 100 employees, 15 million livable amount, possibly a bit bigger than most of you guys are. A company like that would really get to 10 out of 20, in other words, more than the 40%, by simply putting 2 African males and 2 African females on the learnership. That is why here at the Chamber, we have a program that we call the Corporate Business Administrator. And the way that program works is we have taken a South African learnership and we've embedded it into a German qualification, so that at the end of the program, people will get the South African qualification and the German qualification. But to make sure that a company will also be able to claim its BE points for the full 2 years, we've actually taken a learnership that's got 240 credits, so that it justifies you putting the person on that learnership for 2 years. And then they do, and we cover all of that in year 1, and then we cover the German content in year 2. Now, from a South African legal perspective, that is actually an enriched learnership. That's the beautiful thing about learnerships. You can always enrich it. So if you have a niche within your company that you, say for instance, you want your salespeople to be trained on a specific sales model, You can take an existing learnership and enrich that existing learnership with your specific content, and it will still tick all the boxes and meet all the criteria. Was that 5 minutes?
It was interesting. Next, may I present Nkita Buerta, who is head of relations at Daimler Trucks, but more than that, is an expert in perhaps everything empowerment related. She
Okay.
when in discussion with Nkita, I discovered that further expertise that might be of particular interest, and that is understanding of the incentives that are available for companies. And so, among other things, I asked her to mention a bit about that.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. As I've been introduced, my name is Nkita Buerta. I'm the head of external affairs and transformation at Daimler Truck Southern Africa. Daimler Truck Southern Africa is a multinational company owned from Germany, and we are proud to say we're a level 1 BE contributor, the first within our automotive segment, which is the medium heavy commercial space, and then also we're a top employer. I thought, let me kickstart with that so that you know from the conversation that we are going to be having, that is the premise in which I would like to tone some of the topics in. I'm not going to frighten you a bit, colleagues, but I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into why are we having this conversation today? Why are SMEs quite a critical cluster that we should be looking after? And what really was the intention of BE, and has that intention been lived and recognized? Just to give you a little bit of stats. So the government came up with something very interesting called the National Development Plan in 2010. And it's a plan that is meant to outlive itself by 2030, which is in 5 years' time. In that National Development Plan, there was a target to have 24% of people employed by 2030. At the time, so if you look at 1994, post-apartheid, we had 41 million people in terms of population. Today, we're sitting with 60 million people in terms of population. And the unemployment rate in 1994 was 22%. So we did inherit unemployment. And today, I'm sad to say, not much has grown in terms of unemployment, or that has decreased from there. We're sitting at 32.9, which is 33%. Technically, what does this mean? It means our population has outlived our unemployment. So meaning we have overgrown as a population versus having the opportunity or the mechanisms to reduce unemployment, because that was the intention. It's as scary as it sounds, but BE came into effect in 2007, and one of its qualifying requirements in terms of why did we have such a policy was to really bridge this gap of unemployment, to create opportunities, to create viable economies, sustainable economies, create industries within the various sectors. So I come from the manufacturing sector, as I mentioned, in the automotive industry. And one of the topics that Lawrence had asked me just to touch a little bit on was in relation to ownership. Ownership is one of those challenging pillars within the BE scorecard. Every time anyone speaks to me about BE, they say ownership is that not to go to area, and I say definitely not. There are opportunities, there are mechanisms. I'll give an example in terms of the industry that I'm in terms of manufacturing. In 2019, we approached the DTIC and said to the DTIC, Minister, we know that we are multinationals as OEMs or as automotives that are operating within South Africa. So we are not locally owned. We have no mechanisms to relinquish any ownership or shares. May you, Minister, come up with a fund that will enable us to create opportunities as far as ownership is concerned. DTI Minister was very pleased with our business case, and today we enjoy the benefits of what we call a fund called Automotive Investment Transformation Fund. It is a 10-year commitment fund by the OEMs, which is original equipment manufacturers, so all the top 7 automotives, your BMW, your Toyotas, and so forth, make a commitment of contributing 4% of their turnover for a period of 10 years. So that's divided into a 10 years. So each year they make that contribution. The one contribution towards that is towards a cash contribution in terms of cash investment that gets put into this investment. But there's another very important element to that, which is access to market. And you hear this word quite a lot to say, we want to enter into the various industries, but how do we enter? What are the mechanisms or the intricacies that we need in order to have access to this market? So in summary, the Automotive Transformation Fund was really designed around that to create these opportunities, noting that manufacturing contributes 5.2% to the GDP. So we've got a bit of muscle that we have to contribute towards ensuring that our GDP grows and we make sure that this industry continues to thrive. So in my respect, as Lawrence had mentioned, I am quite familiar with a lot of the pillars within the BEE categories. So I've spoken about ownership, skills development. My colleague had mentioned there's other areas as well which are quite important, which is skills development, management and control, which is your employment equity. Another key pillar that is very fundamental and is equally a feeder into ownership, which is procurement and enterprise and supply development. It has quite a high premium in terms of cost. So it looks at who you're procuring services and products from. It also looks at where you are in, who you are investing with in terms of development, who you want to bring into your supply chain mainstream. So equally important as who you choose to bring into those spaces. And then lastly, it's the socio-economic development pillar, as Lawrence had mentioned, equally important because we have to also grow the society and the communities in which we come from. Noting that we've got quite a high unemployment rate, we have then that obligation to go back to those communities and see what can we do to take informal economies and bring them into the mainstream formal economy. And that's what the SMEs mechanisms are there to achieve. So with that, I'm going to hand over to you and we will take the Q&As or the queries as per the session proceeds.
Would you touch on some of the incentives that there might be?
Okay. So in terms of government always says, don't speak for me without me. So I will try not to elaborate on what government incentives there are, but there's quite a few mechanisms which I would deem to be financial instruments that SMEs can tap into through the DTIC. And some of them are financial and some of them are non-financial, some are short-term, some are long-term. So I would encourage the colleagues, we can have a discussion post the session where I would direct them to which divisions or departments are responsible for the various investment instruments within the DTIC. So each industry, each industry has their own investment or incentive opportunities in the form of incentives and grants. So I don't think it would be fair of me just to pinpoint the DTIC, but the tourism industry has their own. The IT industry, for instance, has their own. There's also what we call employee equivalent investment program that's available through the DTIC. So I'm comfortable to have a discussion with the colleagues post that so that I can just direct them as to who they can go and speak to and which departments are responsible for those.
Well, thank you, Zimkita. I know I'll come chat to you. Next, I'd like to present Jeremy Antier, who is the MD of Soufflet Malt in South Africa. And in case anyone doesn't know who Soufflet Malt is, they're the invisible hand that put the goodness into the good beers that we drink.
That's a very good summary. Thanks, Lauren. So, hello everyone. My name is Jeremy Antier. I'm French, as you can hear, so I represent very well the French chamber here today. Sorry. I think I'm a bit. I've got a different profile from what I gathered around the table. I'm more today a user of the services of any advisory company that can tell us, explain to foreigners how B-BBEE works. So I'm just going to give a few words about who is Soufflet and also what is our approach and how do we see B-BBEE as a foreign company. So Soufflet Malt is a global leader in terms of malt, as Lauren said. So it means that we transform barley into malt, and then after the malt is utilized mainly in the brewery industry, it can also be used in the distillery industry. So Soufflet is number one globally. We are running 41 factories, and we are about to launch our 42nd one in South Africa. That is going to be up and running in the next coming 2 years. We've got a strong partnership with Heineken that so far was importing 100% of his malt. And from the moment we're going to produce the malt locally, we're going to replace 100% of import by 100% localization. It was one of the big thing that was put on the table by Heineken when the Distel deal happened 2 years ago. They put mainly three things on the table. A new brewery, certainly, a new malt house, it's us, and they also put a lot of money on the table for enterprise and supplier development. So why? So today I'm still a SME. Why? Because we've started to work in South Africa in 2020 exactly. And the idea was for Soufflet to be visible in South Africa, to understand how South Africa works, and also to make our name known by the farmers. So we've started with less than 10 million rand turnover for many years. And now the challenge for us is to be able to remain B-BBEE level 4 for as long as we've got the contract with Heineken, meaning 30 years. So we have to make sure we are remaining B-BBEE level 4 or better, starting from a SME position, minus 10 million rand turnover, to 1 billion and something, where we're going to be in 2028. So the mandate that I have on the B-BBEE is to understand how it works as a foreign company, as I said, and put the things in place to be able to remain B-BBEE level 4, because contractually for Heineken, it's very important because we are one of the supplier. So as a supplier, I can't be less than 4, otherwise it's not good for them. So it's as a foreign company, it's every country where you develop a new company or a new subsidiary, you've got the local expectations. You have to be very agile and understand what is expected from you. So I think after a couple of years of being explained and understanding what we have to put in place to remain at the right level, I think we fully embrace the principle. It's the big difficulty, I think, is more to be able for us to explain. As soon as you go over the borders of the country and you have to explain to your executive management what is B-BBEE in South Africa, and even more if you address French people, where diversity is something very foreign for there is a lot of concept that requires a lot of explanations. So this is for me the biggest challenge, is to be able to have the full concept explained outside of the country and adhered by some people that are still to make the big decisions, but always wants to perhaps try to go around if they can, But then you understand that the system is strong, and if you go around, you take big risks. So I think it's a very it's a huge strength in South Africa, because it's the way you started, Lawrence started to say that every country has to build a way to make the country strong and be able to, and triple BE for me is one of the big pillar that makes South Africa strong, and the growth is going to be thanks to that much more local than it could be in other country where the protection is weaker. Yes, so I think it's my introduction.
Thank you very much. I invite anyone to ask any questions of any one of us, or just in general, and we'll direct ourselves.
As an organization, when you're looking at triple BE and you have a plan ahead, how do you tie that in, or how should you be working towards tying that into your vision and mission of your organization? Are those two separate plans that you should be looking at? Or is this something that you actually need to come together and incorporate one plan that is, that complements each other in that sense? Or should it be kept separate?
You'd like to start?
For me, the principle always is integrate BEE as part of your business strategy. So BEE should have a tone or a theme in every aspect of your business, whether it is your skills development plan, whether it's your financial plan, whether it's your procurement strategy. It should be part of your business ecosystem in everything that you do, because if it's an instrument that is operating in isolation, it tends to be only utilized once it's needed. So am I tapping into it because I'm looking for a tender or would like to apply for a tender with government? I want to do business with government. Whereas if it's an ongoing operational integrated strategy, you then have the essence of ensuring that at all levels of your business or operations, BEE is part of it. The second element is to ensure that it is sensitized into the organization and integrated into the organization as much as possible. Because if it is a standalone, it becomes maybe a Zimkita problem, or it's a Zimkita a topic or function. But if it's something that is sensitized within the organization at various levels, from your top management right down to your unskilled employee, then it is appreciated that when you have to spend this money and invest in all the activities and offer these bursaries and procure with various suppliers, like my colleague had mentioned, that there is quite a high premium in terms of them ensuring that they comply with the level 4 and sustain it, because it has an investment imperative or a predicament should they not comply with that level 4. So to answer your question next, it must be integrated as part of your business strategy from the onset, and it should be continuous, sustainable, and scalable as your business grows as well, because this year you might be an EME, so your turnover might be less than 10 million. This year you might be a QSE, meaning your turnover is just making it to 50 million. So then the change needs to transition with your strategy as well. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I'll add to that as well. As I mentioned, there are twin imperatives, and one is a transactional and one is a transformational one. In terms of your company and what your target market is, you'll be able to work backwards to see what level you need or what ownership you need in order to thrive in that area. And you'll be able to work backwards to see what you've got to do. On a transformational point of view, depending on your organization, certain elements might be much closer to the heart of your organization. So, for instance, among the company organizations we work with, there's help destitute women in rural areas, start their micro businesses, support them with fashion, planning, etc. It's wonderful. Maybe that has a resonance with an organization, maybe not. Maybe some organizations might be more inclined towards, for instance, education. And there are all sorts of wonderful organizations to work with in that regard. The thing is, who's part of the soul of the organization? People, it's not something management is doing, it's something that the organization is doing. People identify with it. And in my view, South Africans are generally nice, concerned people and like to be associated with good deeds, be part of the solution rather than the problem. And so I agree with what you're saying, that it should be absorbed, not just that, concentrated in the hands of one person, but be part of the soul of the company. Just one other problem with being concentrated in one person's hands, and we come across this so often with our clients. The reasons for doing things in certain ways disappear with the person who used to hold that, who's now in a different place. Nobody knows why they do things in certain ways. Maybe there were good reasons, maybe they weren't, but people sub-optimize terribly because it's not a living thing. It's just something they've got to do. So let it be alive and let both imperatives drive it in my station.
Do we have any questions in the room or online? You can raise your virtual hand as well, and we can have them to you.
Sorry, yes, please.
So, two questions. So, what is the importance of B-BBEE in the company, and what are the key consequences a company might face if they are not compliant?
So it depends, firstly, what sort of company it is. If you're a spaza shop, no one cares if you're empowered or not. People want to buy a loose cigarette, and that's all that matters. So it depends on the sector that you're in, the imperative that it might be. I'll give you an example. One of my clients had spent 8 months trying to get onto a mine's supplier database. They just got on. We empowered a company of theirs, and they told the mine about it. The mine was very excited, and the client said, so last time it took us 8 months to get onto your supplier database. How long will it take now? And the guy picked up his phone. He said, by the end of this phone call. It was that critical. So certain sectors, it makes a huge difference. And certainly if what you're offering is not completely niche, where no one, where people have to deal with you, as soon as there's competition, this gives you an advantage. And of course, in certain areas, you just can't operate without it. So for instance, the broadcasting, anything to do with broadcasting, depending on what you're doing, there's a 30% black ownership requirement or level 4. Otherwise, you can't get a license. Anything that requires a license, more and more generally requires empowerment as well. I'll give you a different example. When you go to a supermarket and you weigh your fruit, chances are the scale that you're using comes from a client of ours. In order for them to offer this, it's got to be SANAS, who's the accreditation agency of all things, not just BEE, has to check their scales and see that their scales are honest and accurate. They won't do it unless they're empowered. So anything that touches government or licensing requires empowerment. And then anything that touches anyone who touches that, chances are requires empowerment as well. So let's say there are niches that might be able to do without it, and it's more powerful in certain areas than others, but it's almost never the case that it makes no difference.
Thank you so much for the insightful presentations from everyone. I have 2 questions. The first one is, we often, not myself personally, but there's often a confusion between B-BBEE and EE, so employment equity. So if you could clarify where those two intersect, start and end, that would be helpful, especially from an SME perspective. And then the second one would be specific to you, Zimkhitha. You mentioned the Automotive Transformation Fund and sort of engaging directly with government to say this particular sector we'd like to negotiate something. Could you give us insight what those conditions are? When does government hear you? If you say we'd like something that is catered to us, whether it's a sector or whether it's a certain foreign, like let's say German company in this case, entity, what conditions does government usually want on the table? That would be helpful. Thanks.
Should I start with that? Okay. So when it comes to what we call employee equivalent investment programs, it is programs that are designed for multinationals. So it's companies that are not owned in South Africa. So you'll develop a business case along with your industry. So we are part of NAMSA, which is the Automotive Association. And through NAMSA, with all its members, we developed a business case and we presented it to the DTIC, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, putting a compelling business case to say, based on our consultation with our international principals, we will not be able to meet the ownership obligation of our BEE scorecard. And government then said, okay, we hear you, but what benefit or value does this business case have for South Africa? We said we will put investment behind it. We will commit for 10 years, which is from 2010, from 2020 until 2030. Very important time. A lot has happened in between that, but it hasn't changed our obligation. So we've had COVID in between, we've had a disruption in terms of our product offering as far as the automotive is concerned. We've got new entrants when it comes to automotives, but that did not change the tone or the commitment of our obligation towards the AITF. It has really been beneficial because it has benefited our suppliers quite tremendously. As I'd mentioned earlier, this is 4% of our turnover over a period of 10 years, which 28% is contributed as a cash investment towards the fund, and then also 62% is contributed towards the access to market. So we then bear the liability to develop our suppliers and make sure that they tap into this fund, and then also have access to the market, to have access to the other OEMs. So in short, to answer your question, an EEIP is quite a valuable financial instrument that can be offered to multinationals. And it's not unique to the automotive industry, colleagues. Other industries have it. The IT industry, such as Google and your Microsoft, they've got EIP and they've got success stories to share. I think we can all attribute in terms of what the growth that we have seen with multinational companies coming to operate in South Africa. So the conditions that are attached to that is the compliance to BEE, to continue improve on your BEE offering. For instance, ourselves as DTSA, we're a level 1 within the heavy commercial industry, or level 1 BEE contributor. So that becomes a factor as well. So it's not something that you just put money behind and you step away. There's obligations that you need to continue doing in order for you to be part of the fund. There are discussions by other industries to form EEIPs for their industries as well, understanding that there's other multinationals who want to come to South Africa and would like to also enjoy the benefit of such a fund, and through its ownership element. So I hope that answers your questions or gets you closer to the response.
Before, and I'd like you to answer the EEB question as well, but I would just like to add to what you had said. Ownership for very large multinationals means something different. You know, if you consider, for instance, Mercedes-Benz might have 4 plants making C-Class around the world, and for their own reasons might choose to increase production at one and decrease production at another. If you were going to invest in the South African one, what would be the right price? It's not even a meaningful question, really. And the automotive industry is such a hugely significant part of South Africa manufacturing and economy in general. I mean, I believe Volkswagen is and related is the biggest employer in the Eastern Cape, but Mercedes is there as well, and they're also massive, etc. So given that it's not a meaningful, ownership is not a meaningful question for a Google, you know, what would it mean? There's got to be an alternative. It's relatively unusual for there to be an industry-wide arrangement, as there was in the case of the automotive sector. But many companies around many multinational companies in all sectors, town planning, Coca-Cola, etc., have made use of it.
And that's your other question. What is the difference between employment equity and also BE? The two actually complement each other. There was once upon a time within the BE scorecard where employment equity was actually a pillar, and then it changed. It became management and control. So meaning it incorporated your board complement within in terms of your measurement. So employment equity is exactly that. It is the plan in which the company complies with in order to improve its demographic complement. So in terms of your white, Indian, African, and colored, and that plan is submitted to the Department of Labor and Employment annually. You have the option of either contributing it annually, every 3 years, or every 5 years. Recently, and when I say recently, about a month ago, the new regulations have come out which prescribe quite stringent requirements as far as employment equity is concerned. Meaning now you no longer have it's not a voluntary reporting. You have the obligation to report whichever size of entity you are. You must commit to a 5-year employment equity plan that's submitted to the Department of Labor, and it will be monitored to ensure the targets that you set out to achieve at the different management levels, from your top, medium, junior levels, you comply with them. If you are not complying, you need to justify. Again, how that fits into BE, one of the pillars within BE is what we call management and control. That speaks to exactly employment equity. So BE on a broader level, that's why it's called the broad-based Black economic empowerment. And EE is just primarily talking about your labor complement in terms of the type of people, the caliber of people that you're employing, the skills as far as skills development is concerned. So that's how the two actually speak to each other. If you were to ask me, can the one function without the other? Absolutely not. That is a definite not. They need to work and operate in parallel in order for the objectives to be achieved. Because we know we do have a deficit in terms of some of the demographics that are not integrated in the formal active economy. And we use employment equity as an instrument or a medium or a plan for us to bridge these gaps as far as employment equity is concerned.
And as a key, run by a different ministry, and in the same way as, for instance, DTIC doesn't manage the mining charter, that's also a different ministry and different industry. Employment equity is an imperative, whereas empowerment, if you don't do it, maybe you won't win business, but you're not going to jail if you don't. So the consequences of non-compliance are different, and because they're different ministries, they're treated differently. Yes, sir.
On a sort of related topic, last week there was very controversial social media frenzy going around about this factory being built, the runway of the Donata Air Force Base, Chinese factory being built, and allegedly there's no black empowerment. And what came out of it is the Chinese are deeply black in South Africa. Is that correct?
So almost no. Once upon a time, I guess like you'll remember, Japanese people were once considered honorary whites, and Chinese people were considered honorary blacks, basically. And so Japanese people don't fall into anything. Chinese people, if they were here prior to 94, or certain, for instance, for ownership, certainly constituted black. So foreign Chinese do not. In fact, there are only about 5,000 qualifying South African Chinese who do qualify as black. I'd be very surprised if any of those 5,000 are involved in this.
That's a big controversy because this factory is massive. It's a steel factory being built in Donata. And there's adjacent to the factory, there's a big hospital being built for bringing Chinese people in. And allegedly they are deemed to be black, and therefore it's okay. And it's doing the rounds. In fact, there's a parliamentarian from the DA taking this matter up apparently. So I just wondered what is happening? Is this an arrangement between the government and China? Or?
It can only be falls foul of the BE codes, where in order to qualify, you need to have either been born in South Africa prior to 94 or been entitled to South African citizenship before democracy arrived here to qualify as a black person if you're Chinese. Yeah, so it's dodge. It's dodge.
It's dodge.
So going as far back in the South African schooling system as public schools, when we know that the majority of public school students are Black students, and these same public schools are often underfunded and subsequently receive lesser quality of education, these Black students enter the workforce. And now my question is, as companies, should they, shall I say, take a chance on this youth and further their empowerment with education and investments? Or how would this tie into the BEE?
Yes. Look, let me take a step even further back. I think the one commodity that sub-Saharan Africa has, that the whole world wants, are young people. Sub-Saharan Africa does not have the type of population pyramids that we see across the world. And so not only are South African companies that are trying to comply with the management pillar of the scorecard vying for young people of excellence, but there's also an international demand for them. So taking a chance on these guys and uplifting them, everybody wins in the end. And I'll answer even for them. So the way I always try to sell it, and I do try to sell it when I'm, after all, trying to sell training products, is to say to a company, if you are investing in training somebody over a 2 or 3 year period, then why don't you look at the cream of the crop of those guys to either development so that they can come into management, or development then to the point where they become entities that you support in terms of your entity supply the development, so that those entities then become suppliers, and then they become your suppliers and their supplier development. So the different pillars of the scorecard are not in isolation. They are not silos. Maybe they shouldn't even be called pillars, but the one initiative absolutely leads into the possibility to achieve the others. Now, if you have somebody that's, and I think that's always been the problem, for instance, with the ownership scorecard, the ownership. Why? Because it seems like the same people are always benefiting. And that's really what irks people. They say we've lost the broad based. But if you are continually developing people, developed people are just in demand. Now, if you're engineer or a CA, really nobody cares anymore. You can just do the job. So yes, I do believe we should spend a lot more money in training and education.
Maybe just to add on to that, I think it's to the company's benefit to be developing these students, because those students become your pipeline into your mainstream economy. And it's important also to follow trends in terms of the thriving industries that we're going into. For instance, we've got a disruptor called AI as an example. Technology and innovation is one of those key determining factors of our growth in the various industries. So it is to the company's benefit to ensure that they provide mechanisms or mediums to support these students from, in some instances, you find them supporting from primary school, high school, tertiary, and then they employ them in what we call internships or learnerships. There's the YES program as well. That is also an enabler. And then they then become your pipeline into your mainstream employment opportunities. And again, we are we are quite a unique continent in South Africa on the basis that we are the seventh highest and we have the seventh highest unemployment rate in the world. So what then determines us reducing this unemployment, I'll call it an irregularity or percentage, is for us to capacitate and create these education mechanisms. Yeah.
But when I said at the beginning that each of the elements of empowerment related to an exclusion from the economy, skills development relates directly to the idea of Bantu education, where recall how the architect of apartheid for Woods said, what's the point in teaching a black person? I mean, that's where we're coming from. And skills development was a direct attempt to try and change that. And in fact, being responsive to the reality that there was, they introduced bursaries as an element in skills development in response to the fees must fall because people are being excluded monetarily. Anyway, there are lots, and the YES initiative to bring people in. There are lots of very good initiatives, too many to list, but I'll mention just one. There's something called the Maharishi Institute, Invincibility Institute. Takes these kids, trains them, and of 23,000 graduates, 21,000 have jobs. So it's not only bleak, and the codes are trying to fix that. Not effectively yet.
Just for the parallel with the Soufflet, I think also in the development strategy, there's also obviously skill developments and training with the different farmers that you're working with, which is also, I believe, important to do a parallel with Soufflet.
Yes. No, I was listening. I think my point here is the fact that it is also sometimes not a good thing, but it is not a bad thing to address some people that are not enough skilled, because you give them a lot of the knowledge by yourself, and you can bring someone from, because the system still exists. So there is still an education that gives the basic minimum in South Africa that goes until what is obvious to have, reading, writing, but then after there is a gap that is easily that we can compensate us as the company, training the employees by ourselves. And sometimes it's a very positive thing in the way that you get a result. You can get a technician very quickly because you are the one who's saying that. For my example, for instance, I don't need or it's good always to have, but to grow barley, it's very specific. Grow barley, you can spend 2 to 3 years becoming an expert in barley. And for me, it took me 2 years to get experts in barley, getting some people that started with a very low experience. So then when we're going to have the factory, it's the same. When we will need some people to operate the silo or to be to do the maintenance of the, I don't need someone who already has 3 years after matric to, I can give everything by yourself. So no, that's true. But I don't say that trying to compensate the fact that it is the basic of education in South Africa is already a strong base. You were referring to the public school. That's a reality. The system is tough, I guess, because we live here, we don't really see that. But as soon as we drive 100 or 200 kilometers, we can see. But still, the basics are strong for me. I can be wrong, but.
We haven't had any questions from the online audience. Can we at least get one? I know you are itching to ask a question. We've got a question. Yeah, thank you. The question is, as a family-owned multinational, whereby the South African organization is 100% owned by the parent company in Germany, so meaning fully owned by a founding family, now being a QME, any recommendations what we could or should do long-term to increase our scorecard? The parting of shares or constructions of other legal constructs, for example, not being an option.
May I? First thing to do is engage with, is it really not an option? Because people, there's so many horror stories around unhappy marriages between empowerment partners and the current shareholders. And one of the biggest problems is if it's not working anymore, it's very difficult to extricate yourself. One of our clients, a large client, was entitled to exit the empowerment partner, but for 2 years they couldn't find him to tell him that. You know, it's terrible. It need not be like that. And so long as that driven family understands that at any stage they can exit and restore themselves to their current position, and if in the meantime it doesn't get in the way of their control, it turns into a sum. They can spend, as I showed, a lot of money trying to achieve a low level that won't make much difference. Or if they're prepared to engage positively, they'll see that it's not so bad and they can deliver much more and probably at a lower price and less obtrusively than it would otherwise be done. In the absence of any kind of ownership, it's difficult.
Perhaps from the industry leaders here, how do you have that conversation with headquarters in order for somebody that's not on the ground, that is not here to really see it day in, day out, have these conversations? How do you actually bring up that conversation, or what are sort of the main topics that you discuss when you have these discussions?
variety, actually. We also look at the type of country that we're in, third world country. We look at some of our socioeconomic challenges. We look at unemployment. So we do an economic matrix that shows or depicts what South Africa actually looks like, where the challenges are, and how we as a multinational need to support and to substantiate our role having to operate in that particular country. So it's to our benefit as well to portray or to put across our South African challenges for what they really are, and have headquarters or our parent companies committing to invest and convert these challenges into opportunities through us. And knowing that the majority of investment does come from the parent company, we are just the conduit in terms of producing, and I'm maybe referencing Daimler in this instance, that we're a manufacturer and we're producing trucks and buses and passenger cars and sprinters and so forth in South Africa. It is also the parent company's benefit to ensure that the country in which they have a plant or a manufacturing operation in does progress. Because government, as the regulator, has the obligation, has also the opportunity to say, if you are doing this, let me help you achieve this, and this is how. And typical case in point, it's AITF. They said you don't have the mechanisms to relinquish any equity within your company in South Africa. We are willing to invest this 4% of our turnover over a period of 10 years. So I think it's a mutual relationship that must always be maintained by the region in which you're operating in, and make sure that the headquarters always has an understanding of the economic factors that impact the country in which you operate. I might be maybe in Brazil, it might be a different perspective. I might be in India, it might be a different perspective. But in terms of the operations in South Africa, that's the sort of narrative or the conversations that we have. And those happen on a regular basis. And we interface those conversations through the strategic forums, whether it's board of management, executive management meetings. So we make sure those messages are integrated in our business updates. They don't only just see themselves when it's time for investment discussions or when it's bonus time to discuss how much we're going to increase in terms of salaries, but they are a continuous conversation with headquarters. As a result, they end up reminding us as to, hey, how far are we with that presentation in terms of that BE level? You made a commitment to achieve a BE level by 2025. Have you achieved it? Where are you? And what can we support? What can we do to support you? So they also hold us accountable in terms of our local commitments as well.
That is a, sorry.
No, you can start.
It's a much better answer than I'm going to give. However, when I frequently have clients who, I guess a third of our clients are multinationals, and it's a question we come across very often. And the super précis from a transactional point of view is it doesn't get in the way of your control. You can reverse it at a known cost whenever you want to. Then it's just a sum. What is it going to cost you? What are you going to gain by doing it? First, and it doesn't get in the way of your control. It's just a sum.
Yes, on my side, the answer is not only about this bracket between 10 and 50 million. I know it's the topic today, but for us to answer your question, so the first reflex of top management when you go and you say we will need local partners, the answer is no. Let's try to do it differently, because it's not even against the system. It's the fact that a big multinational or a big company like us, either we are doing things and we keep the control and we've got the full benefit of the investment, or if we've got partners, it's because we buy a company in a country and there is a former owner, he wants to stay in the equity. But here in South Africa, the thing is, I think the law has been very, very well done, because on our side, for instance, procurement is a huge problem because we are addressing farmers, and if there is an industry that is not very much transformed, I think it's agriculture. So it means that our procurement is for us what we have to compensate through the rest. So starting with the procurement that is going to be tough, and imagining that we can get our BBBEE level 4 or better without the ownership, it doesn't work. So, according to me, or perhaps expert can explain to me differently, but I think there is a big importance of the ownership. Then after, why the law is well done? Because ownership, you've got many options when you start to speak about ownership. For instance, in France, we've got a system where naturally in the law, we share the benefit with the employees. It's really written in our law, and all companies from 50 employees have to do it. Here, to explain to France now, or a portion of the equity can be given to our own employees. Now it's easy to explain, and they can easily make parallels with some ideas that they know. Then after, if you explain, no, but South Africa is a very complicated country, having a partner that can also help us to understand many different. So in our case, we are in agribusiness, but we are also in agriculture. So having a partner who's explaining a bit also to us how it works, it's quite useful and important. So always big companies, they want to keep the control and they don't want to share. Then there is some equity equivalent or the other equivalent that you were talking about that I don't know. So there are solutions that are offered to foreigners. Usually, from my understanding, they are very costly. But at the same time, you want the comfort to be 100% owner of your business. So you pay the price on another. So options are offered. It's not like if you are in a corner and you can't find solutions. It's just a matter of understanding fully and being able to translate this to a way that big management, they can understand. And that's the challenge. That's very much the challenge.
I think we have one question online, but time is running out. So I'm not sure if we can maybe take the further questions offline, if that's okay, and we can wrap up the session.
Sure. Well, should we close it after these two?
Yes.
So I'm not an expert in BEE. Thank you so much for all of this explanation. So I'm just going to take it on a different angle. That's the angle of chambers of commerce and everything we're doing with the government, and to try to assist even more on the development of South Africa. What we see now, the present government have a few key objectives. It's promoting public-private partnership, facilitating private investment opportunities, boosting trade relations, decreasing unemployment, and grow the SME economy, the SMEs in South Africa. These priorities are not only fully aligned with the French Chamber of Commerce and the German Chamber of Commerce ongoing mission, but it's also directly supporting the South Africa B-BBEE, let's say it like that, sorry about that. By fostering an inclusive business collaboration and encouraging responsive investment and expanding trade, we actively contribute in creating a sustainable economy, economic growth, and meaningful empowerment opportunities. If I look at all the trends in Europe on ESG and so on, South Africa, going back 95 in the Constitution of South Africa, South Africa is the only country, it's one of the only countries where the nature is one of the person in the Constitution. If you see everything that has been done, BEE is a precursor on what happened in ESG worldwide. Is it the right way? Are all the components easy to match? Nobody gets the answer. We have to work with it and to basically find it as an opportunity for the companies instead of being a barrier of entry. So I want to say thank you to our experts from Quiver Tree to assist us putting all of that together, for our host and creator of this event, the German Chamber of Commerce, and of course to our panelists from Daimler Truck and Soufflet. Thank you so much.